There is a silent misconception that has been going on for generations, the belief that human beings only live in search of pleasure or power. This view, although understandable in a world that offers us comfort and competition in such generous doses, fails to explain why, even when we have everything, there are so many voids. Why does someone who has status, possessions, success, and pleasure still feel lost? Why does pain visit even palaces and boredom stalk even the victorious? Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the hell of the concentration camps and a witness to the brutality and light that coexist in the human soul, dared to answer, "Man is not driven by pleasure, nor by power, but by meaning. His deepest thirst is for a purpose that transcends the moment. It is this desire for meaning that keeps him standing when everything else collapses. When comfort becomes insufficient, when strength fails, when applause falls silent, what sustains the human being is the certainty that his life has a reason." Frankl observed this not in a comfortable study, but at the very edge of human existence. Amid barbed wire fences, hunger, violence, and death, he saw men die inside before they died physically, just as they lost their sense of purpose. And he saw others endure, not because they had any hope of escaping, but because they clung to a greater purpose, a person waiting for them, a work not yet finished, an idea to share with the world. In other words, a meaning to live for or even die for. This desire for meaning is therefore more than a philosophical aspiration. It is a spiritual need, as vital as air to the lungs. When repressed, man becomes fragmented. He loses himself in vices, in distractions, in an empty search for pleasure that soon loses its flavor, or in a race for power that never really satisfies him. Only when human beings begin to ask, what for, and not just how much or how, do they begin to rediscover themselves. For the meaning of life is not given in manuals or ready-made formulas. It is unique, personal, and often silent, but once found, it transforms pain into testimony, fatigue into persistence, and even death into part of a valuable story. So while many still struggle in search of momentary pleasure or passing status, those who discover their meaning learn to endure even the unbearable. And that is why, in the end, the desire for meaning, subtle but profound, is more powerful than any pleasure or power. There is a type of pain that doesn't warn us. It arrives without knocking, without asking permission. It interrupts routines, destroys plans, shakes certainties. It is the unexpected diagnosis, the sudden loss, the betrayal that hurts deeply, the loneliness that sets in silently. And faced with this, it is common to think, this is going to destroy me. And in fact, it can, but only if we don't find a meaning for it. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and survivor of the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps, understood suffering in its rawest and most absurd form. He saw men reduced to numbers, treated as objects, starved, humiliated. But he also saw that even there, some maintained an invisible dignity, an inner flame. Some died before they even died, surrendered by hopelessness. Others resisted, not because they had physical strength, but because they maintained a purpose in the midst of suffering. Frankl realized a profound and paradoxical truth. Pain, in and of itself, does not destroy. What destroys is pain without meaning, suffering that seems gratuitous, useless, empty. When a human being is deprived of a why, any how becomes unbearable. But when there is a purpose, even the most excruciating pain can be transformed into something more, into growth, into transcendence, into legacy. Suffering, when experienced with purpose, can reveal dimensions of life that comfort could never show us. It can teach us compassion, humility, patience. It can bring us closer to others. It can reveal to us the truth about what really matters. How many people have not awakened to the meaning of life at the very moment when they thought all was lost. But this is not about romanticizing pain. Frankl never did that. He knew that suffering is real, hard, and often unfair. But he also knew that running away from it is not always possible, and that when it knocks on the door, we have only one freedom: to choose how to respond, to choose whether we will allow pain to destroy us or whether we will give it a place. In the construction of our path, the difference between despair and hope often lies not in the circumstances, but in the perspective. When we can find a why in our pain, whether it's a cause, a memory, a faith, or someone to fight for, then suffering doesn't drag us down. It shapes us. It refines us. It humanizes us. And that is why, according to Frankl, suffering only becomes unbearable when its meaning is lost. But when we find it, even in the midst of tears, we discover a strength that we perhaps did not even know existed within us. Pain doesn't have to be the end. With meaning, it can be the beginning. We live surrounded by forces that we often cannot control. We are thrown into situations that we did not choose. We are born into certain families, into certain cultures, in historical times that we did not decide. We suffer accidents, illnesses, losses, and none of these things are consulted before they happen. Sometimes it seems that we are puppets in the hands of chance, hostages to what the world imposes on us. And yet, Viktor Frankl reminds us of a truth that is as simple as it is powerful. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In this space lies our power of choice. This, he says, is the last of human freedoms, inner freedom. The freedom to choose the attitude with which we face what happens to us. Even when everything is taken away from us, we still have this left to decide how to respond. Frankl did not write this as a self-help book, nor as a philosophical abstraction. He wrote it after losing his entire family to the Holocaust. He wrote it after years of living in concentration camps where men were stripped of everything: name, dignity, possessions, identity. Everything could be stripped away, except what was happening deep within the soul. He saw men who, even when surrounded by death and brutality, shared their last piece of bread, offered a word of comfort, maintained their faith, however shaky, in something greater. They were just as trapped as the others, but they were not enslaved inside. That's the point. There are external circumstances that we cannot change, but there is an internal instance that no one can invade without our consent. It is there that our true freedom lies. It is there that we decide whether we will become bitter or compassionate, whether we will let pain destroy us or transform us. Frankl challenges us with a question that dismantles any easy justification. What do you do with what happens to you? Do you surrender? Do you close yourself off? Do you return to the world the same brutality you received? Or do you choose, despite everything, to remain human? This inner freedom may seem small, but it is immense. It is what separates the man who sinks into resentment from the man who rises through forgiveness. It is what transforms victims into witnesses and witnesses into sources of hope. Frankl became this. He emerged from human hell, and instead of wasting himself in hatred, he decided to teach the world that it is possible to be free even when the body is imprisoned. This idea bothers us because it makes us responsible. It's easier to blame the world, the past, others. It's harder to recognize that deep down, the way we react to what happens to us is our choice. And that's where true power lies. It is not a noisy freedom. It is not the freedom to do what one wants. It is deeper. It is the freedom to be who one is, even when everything conspires against it. This freedom no tyranny can steal, no pain can silence, no misfortune can stain, because this freedom lives where no one can touch within us. We live in a paradoxical age, We have never been so surrounded by stimuli, possibilities, technologies, distractions. The world fits in the palm of our hand. We can talk to someone on the other side of the planet in seconds. We have more comfort than kings of centuries past. And yet, there is a silent restlessness that haunts us, a feeling that something is missing even when, apparently, we lack nothing. This is the emptiness that Viktor Frankl identified with surgical precision, existential emptiness. It is not the same as sadness, nor is it exactly depression, although it can lead to it. It is a kind of fatigue of the soul, a lack of direction, a feeling that the days pass, the goals are achieved, but the heart remains empty. Frankl saw this phenomenon growing at an alarming rate, especially in the modern world. After the Great Wars, with religious, cultural, and family structures shaken, contemporary man found himself at large, apparently free but internally disoriented. Freedom without responsibility, comfort without meaning, abundance without purpose. According to Frankl, it is in this scenario that the most subtle and dangerous symptoms of existential emptiness emerge: boredom, apathy, addictions, compulsive search for pleasure, endless consumption, the need to distract oneself at all costs. It is as if human beings, when they cannot find a purpose, try to numb themselves from the discomfort of not having one. And the most curious and tragic thing is that many people don't even realize that what they feel is a lack of meaning. They say they are tired, stressed, unmotivated. They say that life has lost its charm, that everything seems the same, but they rarely ask themselves, what am I living for? What in fact has value to me? Why do I get up every day? Frankl warned that the absence of these questions is one of the great evils of our time. When human beings do not know why they live, they become vulnerable to any influence, to extreme ideologies, to empty promises, to lifestyles that only distance them even further from themselves. That's why he said, existential emptiness is dangerous, not because it is empty, but because it is filled with what is useless. It's like drinking salt water thinking it will quench your thirst. It deceives you for the moment, but it only increases your despair. Logotherapy emerges as a response to this. It does not offer ready-made formulas, but invites the individual to actively seek his or her own meaning. And it does not matter if it is small in the eyes of the world, whether it is caring for someone, creating something, enduring pain with dignity. What matters is that this meaning is true, personal and profound, because when meaning is lost, life becomes just a stopwatch, and time a burden. But when meaning is found again, even difficult moments gain density, meaning, and direction. Because the opposite of despair is not empty optimism, it is conscious purpose. And where there is purpose, the emptiness disappears, not because it has been filled, but because it has been transformed. Pain is perhaps the only human experience that everyone will inevitably experience. It is democratic. It does not choose age, social class, religion, or ideology. Sooner or later, it finds us, sometimes slowly, sometimes abruptly. It can be a loss, a disappointment, a failure, a profound loneliness. And when faced with it, it is natural to want to run away. Pain scares, disturbs, and destabilizes. But Viktor Frankl invites us to look at pain from a different perspective. A perspective that neither denies nor glorifies it, but recognizes it as a possibility for transformation. For him, suffering is not just a burden. It can also be a call to growth. This idea, at first glance, seems almost cruel. How can pain make us grow? How can something that breaks us also build us? The answer lies in the attitude we adopt towards it. Frankl observed that human beings are capable of transforming suffering into inner victory, as long as they accept the challenge of giving pain meaning. He saw this in the concentration camps. There, where suffering was extreme and daily, he witnessed not only the worst, but also the best of human beings. There were those who, even in inhumane conditions, found ways to show solidarity, to maintain their dignity, to resist morally, not because they were stronger, but because they had found a meaning that justified their resistance. And this also applies to the pains of everyday life. How many times does a loss make us rethink our priorities? How many times does a crisis force us to mature? How many times does pain show us who we really are and who is really by our side? Of course, growth does not happen automatically. Pain in and of itself does not teach us. What teaches us is the reflection that arises from it, the decision to go through it with awareness, the choice not to waste it. Frankl said that suffering is like a knife. It can hurt us, or it can help us carve something deeper within ourselves, depending on how we use it. It's not about seeking out pain. It's not an invitation to masochism, nor a romanticization of suffering. But since pain is inevitable, why not take something from it that transforms us? Why not allow it to make us more human, more empathetic, more aware, stronger? Pain forces us to stop, to look within, to abandon masks, illusions, fantasies of control. It confronts us with raw reality and often introduces us to versions of ourselves that we were unaware of. More fragile, yes, but also more real. Frankl believed that the greatest tragedy of pain is not in the suffering itself, but in going through it without learning anything, in coming out the other side exactly the same. Pain that does not teach hardens, but pain that is faced with meaning, with courage, with openness to what it has to reveal, refines us. Because growing up hurts, but not growing up hurts even more. We live in a society obsessed with success. It's everywhere, in shop windows, on social media, in motivational speeches, in inflated resumes, in milestones that push us from an early age. You have to be someone in life. But no one tells us what exactly that someone means. Most people understand success as an achievement, as a goal achieved, as prominence, recognition, applause, having an admired career, an enviable fortune, status, followers. And yes, none of this is wrong. Success can be the result of effort, dedication, and talent. The problem is not success. It is when it replaces meaning. Viktor Frankl, with his vision forged in the furnace of human suffering, makes a crucial distinction. Success is a result. Meaning is direction. Success can be measured, meaning felt. Success can be visible to others. Meaning is often only perceived by those who carry it. How many people reach the pinnacle of what we call success only to find themselves empty? How many achieve their goals, accumulate achievements, and yet feel that something essential is missing? Frankl saw that by seeking success as an end in itself, human beings often distance themselves from themselves and approach a more subtle type of misery, existential misery. This is because success answers the question, what have I achieved? But meaning answers something deeper. Why am I living? Frankl said that meaning is unique and non-transferable. It is not given by the rules of society, by market metrics, or by the comparisons that surround us. It arises from the encounter between the singularity of our existence and the concrete demands of life. It can be found in a simple job done with love, in caring for someone in need, in writing a book or planting a tree, or even enduring with dignity a pain that cannot be changed. And it's curious, when a human being lives with meaning, success, in its own time, in its own form, often comes. But when one lives only for success, one doesn't always find meaning. Because success is what happens outside. Meaning is what happens inside. Frankl challenged his patients with a decisive question: are you accomplishing what is valuable or just what is visible? Because success can bring admiration, But only meaning brings peace. Only meaning sustains us. On difficult days, only meaning gives coherence to the path, even when it is neither straight nor glorious. And it is this sense that allows human beings to look back at the end of their lives and say, it was worth it. Not because everything went well, but because even when it didn't, it made sense. At a time when everything seems to be available, information, entertainment, career options, ways of being and living, a new anxiety emerges, almost without realizing it. Now, what do I want to be? We are taught to create goals, design visions of the future, invent ourselves as if we were unfinished personal marketing projects. But Viktor Frankl proposes something very different, something profoundly countercultural. It is not about inventing the meaning of life, but about discovering it. This difference is colossal. In the modern mindset, there is an almost absolute belief that we are the total authors of our existence, as if we could determine, control, and construct everything. But Frankl, a keen observer of the human spirit, reminds us that life is a dialogue, not a monologue. It presents us with circumstances, encounters, pains, possibilities. And the question is not, what do I want from life, but what does life expect of me? Yes, you can want many things, but meaning is not a fantasy you write on a whiteboard with colored markers. It is not a motivational slogan. It is a response, a listening, an acknowledgement that life, with all that it is, beautiful and hard, predictable and absurd, places before us specific tasks that only we can accomplish. Frankl saw meaning as something concrete, objective, real, but deeply personal. It is not something imposed from outside, but it is not arbitrary either. It reveals itself in the details, in daily decisions, in unexpected encounters, in inevitable suffering. It is in the relationships we build, in the causes that touch us, in the pain we endure for something greater than ourselves. And the most impressive thing is that this meaning is not eternal and immutable. It changes. It is dynamic. The meaning of life today may not be the same as it is tomorrow. It depends on the stage of life, our circumstances, and the people around us. What matters is that we are attentive, available, and listening. Frankl said that when a person does not find meaning, they are not making a mistake by inventing little, but by not realizing that the meaning is there, in front of them, waiting to be answered. This requires humility, because it means that life is not a field where you do whatever you want, but a field of responsibility where we are called to be what the moment demands of us. Meaning doesn't shout. It whispers. It's between the lines of everyday life. It can be in a gesture of care, in continuing to write despite rejection, in not giving up on someone, in forgiving, in resisting hopelessness, in accepting a pain that cannot be changed, but can be carried with dignity. We do not invent meaning. We recognize it. And in recognizing it, we recognize ourselves as well. Imagine the following scene. You're standing in front of a blank sheet of paper, next to it a pen. There are no instructions, no title, no questions visible, just this: the paper, the time, and you. This is, in essence, Viktor Frankl's metaphor for life. At a time when many people are always looking for ready-made answers, formulas, shortcuts, doctrines, tutorials to be happy, Frankl offers us an uncomfortable and at the same time profoundly emancipating revelation. Life is not here to answer you. It is not a manual. It does not have an explanatory index. It is the question, and the answer is you. Frankl saw this with piercing clarity in the concentration camps. There, where all illusion of control was stripped away, many still tried to cling to some metaphysical explanation, some hidden and definitive meaning that justified their suffering. But he realized something even more powerful. Life was asking. Each person, at that very moment, how they would choose to respond to the absurd. To respond with resignation or with revolt, with despair or with dignity, with selfishness or with compassion. The point is, it doesn't matter what life brings. It matters how you respond to it. Frankl proposed a radical inversion of existential logic. We should not ask ourselves, what do I expect from life? But rather, what does life expect from me? It is a question that disarms the ego. It shifts the focus from expectation to responsibility, and it demands constant inner listening. Because the answer is not written in any book, nor is it dictated by any authority. It can only be lived in the silent practice of the choices we make every day. This is where human freedom reveals itself in its rawest and most demanding form. We are free to respond as we please, but we are also responsible for it. Frankl said, every moment is an opportunity to respond to life's call in a unique and unrepeatable way. And that means there is no outsourcing. No one can live for you, no one can respond in your place. Life does not give us guarantees. It does not spare us from suffering, injustice, or death, but it does grant us something even more valuable, the chance to respond to all of this with awareness, courage, and integrity. And the most beautiful thing is that these answers don't have to be grandiose. Sometimes the answer is to keep trying. Other times it's to accept the end of something. It could be saying no when everyone expects a yes, or simply taking care of someone, or forgiving, or getting out of bed even without strength for the love of something greater. These are the answers that make life worthwhile, even in the midst of chaos. And in the end, according to Frankl, we will not be measured by what we have suffered or achieved, but by how we have responded to everything that life has asked of us. Imagine yourself trapped in a dark cell, without hope, surrounded by cold walls and constant threats. Imagine that everything around you takes away your freedom, your body, your routine, your environment, yet there is something that no one can touch, no tormentor can steal. This something is inner freedom, absolute control over your attitude, your choices, your stance towards reality. Viktor Frankl, who lived this extreme reality in the Nazi concentration camps, brings a message that transcends time and space. Even in the most brutal of oppressions, inner freedom remains inalienable. Contrary to what many people think, freedom is not simply the absence of external obstacles or the ability to act according to one's will. It is, above all, a freedom of the spirit, a freedom that resides in the space between external stimulus and internal response, a space where our capacity for choice resides. Frankl observed that although the prisoners' bodies were enslaved, their spirits could still choose. They could choose their attitude toward pain, humiliation, and loss. They could decide whether to give in to despair or to resist with dignity. This concept revolutionizes the common understanding of freedom, because if freedom depends on the environment, it can easily be taken away. But if freedom is a matter of inner attitude, it is indestructible. This is the ultimate freedom, the one that no one can take away, not even the cruelest circumstances. And this inner freedom is also the source of hope. For when we have lost everything external, when we sit on the cold ground of life, we can still maintain our humanity. We can still say yes to life, even when it says no to us. Frankl reminds us that pain and suffering may limit the body, but they never need to limit the soul. We may suffer, but we can still choose how to suffer. We may be trapped, but we can still be free in our mind and heart. This inner freedom, paradoxically, is not a passive state, but an active form of resistance. It is a way of creating meaning where everything else seems meaningless. It is a supreme act of courage, the decision to be more than one's circumstances. Thus, even in the midst of deep pain, even in the face of the most intense adversity, we can find a spark of freedom that illuminates and sustains existence. In an era marked by speed, abundant information and incessant consumerism, existential emptiness has become a silent evil, a subtle epidemic that corrodes many lives from within. Meaning is often drowned out by the noise of distractions and the pressure of superficial goals. But Viktor Frankl's message resonates with renewed force. The will to meaning is the most powerful driving force that can propel a human being above all pain, difficulty, or uncertainty. It is the beacon that guides us when everything around us seems unstable. Frankl's legacy invites us to seek something beyond immediate pleasure or momentary success. He calls us to reconnect with what truly matters, with our personal mission, with our deepest values, with our commitment to answering life's calling. In this contemporary world, meaning can be found in multiple forms: in art that moves, in work that transforms, in care that welcomes, in the fight for justice, in solidarity that brings together, in love that heals. The will to find meaning protects us from alienation, despair, and feelings of uselessness. It reminds us that even when the landscape is complex, fragmented, and confusing, each life has a unique and irreplaceable purpose. And most importantly, this purpose is not a fixed point, but a path to be followed, a mystery to be lived with courage and authenticity. Frankl offers us not only a philosophy, but a practice of life, a practice that challenges conformity, that demands responsibility, but that also makes room for hope, dignity, and fulfillment. In the end, the legacy of the will to meaning is an open invitation. Live not to avoid pain, but to answer the call that life makes to you, with courage, with love, with meaning,